Today we are of course doing the Visha Upanishad class, but I just want to take a few minutes today, maybe about 5 to 10 minutes, to talk of one important aspect of our teaching, which is in what we call as Shravanam. So generally, what we call as Shravanam is translated in English as listening or hearing. So there is a little more to that, and since whether you are new to this kind of listening or if you are a long time student, regardless of that, it is important to reflect again and again on this art of listening, on making sure we are able to have this effective listening. Because most of us, especially, like I am assuming, we are not like people like, who are spending 4 or 5 hours every day in just listening alone, like as some of us have done in years of our sadhana. But at the same time, it is not necessary also to just keep on listening for so many hours, unless that knowledge, that information is getting translated into knowledge and wisdom within us. So how do we listen? This is for a few minutes, I'm going to just talk on it and some tips on how we can actually listen properly. Shravanam. So Shravanam, in one sense, if you really look at that thing of it is called as hearing, but we are aware of three aspects in hearing going on. One is there has to be a speaker, the one who is giving the talk or the pravachan. And then there is the hearer, the listener, the listeners, the person who is listening. And then there is an important aspect, which is the instrument of listening, right? So in everything, there is the state triad, right? There is the, like even if you're seeing something, you're seeing and the thing that is seen and that medium through which you are seeing, or through the instrument through which you're seeing. So for example, that Sanskrit word Shravanam, when it is etymology of that is looked at, it is called as Shruyate Anena iti Shravanam. That through which we listen is called as Shravanam, or that through how we come to hear, that is called as Shravanam. So that is focusing more on that instrument or how we are listening. But it is not just the instrument, as we may say the instrument, what is the instrument of listening? So we may say it is ears, or at the most we may say through the mind, I'm able to translate what my ears are hearing, or the mind is empowering it. So that is still a limited understanding of what we talk in Vedanta as Shravanam. So in Vedanta and in many other these kind of self-knowledge or higher knowledge kind of philosophies, it is not just that what we are listening through, it is a complete attitude of listening. So that includes not just like the ears, it includes that sense of Shraddha with which we are listening, that heart-centered faith or receptivity, we can say, openness through which we are able to listen. Because unless there is that openness, unless there is that Shraddha, that knowledge, that becomes just another accumulation of information at the most, or at the most it can become like a functional knowledge, but it doesn't become a transformative wisdom for us. So that really what we want out of this kind of classes, that which we are listening to, is that it is not just a mere kind of a thing which we're hearing, but doesn't translate into a personal transformation and wisdom for us. So the one kind of listening, which many of us are in the world also, and especially in many spiritual paths we are familiar with, is when sometimes there are stories being told, like here in many places there is this Bhagavad Sapta Kathas and all that happen. It's like a lot of stories are being told. Or you can also think of some places where you listen to some music or something, and different kind of ways through which people and spiritual paths are kept entertained, but that is what that is happening, that is stimulating and exciting us at the level of our mind, especially that emotional aspect of us. So it is good. It is good for many people. There's nothing wrong. But that if we stop there only, then we just get some kind of an inspiration, but it is like the ebb and flow of emotions. It is like you may feel high at one day, and then next day again you will go low. So that is what happens when we are listening only to stories. So sometimes some speakers use a lot of stories to keep the audience entertained, engaged. So generally we don't do that much in Vedanta, but sometimes we do, just to illustrate a point or to drive home a message. But the idea is not to just make you come to tears with that and say, oh, now this is a wonderful listening. So that is not really going to help us on the long run. And another kind of approach is intellectual stimulation. Like you can give a lot of logic, a lot of arguments, and a lot of traditional teachers, many people do that, even in Vedanta. They focus a lot on using the Nyaya, the logic. And what happens, nowadays there's a lot of scientific theories and all that. So you use all that, and you can create a certain kind of an intellectual stimulation or for the mind, But it's not really an intellect there also. It is again an excitement for the mind, and that for a while you will be intrigued. For a while you will be able to come up with good arguments to talk to people and all that, but you will not transform by that. It will not change you. It will not translate into wisdom for us. So this is where, we have to find that right balance, and more importantly, transcend into a higher kind of listening, where that intellect is gaining that information, but not just accumulating that information. It is able to translate that information, and what happens is it is able to experience that. So that information should come in your perception, in your experience of daily life. Of course, by applying also, by superficially application also, that will translate. But more importantly, that should actually translate and transform us. In the, I like one of the analogies or the metaphors given, especially in one of the Buddhist schools, They talk about, like they give a thing of how not to listen, defective listening, what we call as Shravanam-dosha. Shravanam-dosha means the fault in listening. So they give this metaphor. What is this metaphor? Is you imagine a pot, and some of my old students might have heard this before. There is a pot, and you want to put water into that pot. So that pot is a representation of our mind, we can say, or our intellect. And the water is that knowledge or information that is coming in. So there are few ways where the defective listening happens using this metaphor. First one is, imagine that, first one is for lack of retention of that information. Imagine that pot is cracked. What happens, you're putting water in that pot, but that pot is cracked and all the water will start flowing out, it will not hold. So no matter how many hours you listen, you have finished hours, you have created records of YouTube listening or whatever, but still that information is not transforming you because that pot is cracked. So this is like what we say, you hear from one ear, you let go of another ear, right? It's another way of saying it. Then similarly, on those lines, if that pot has some mud or some dirt at the bottom, what happens? And this is where, the Chitta Shuddhi is important. We should have some spiritual practices, some sadhana, some kind of practices through which that purification of the heart and mind has happened. Otherwise, we are carrying this wrong knowledge and wrong samskaras, So sometimes, we all come from, sometimes when we come to Vedanta, we have explored already many paths, most of us. So we carry some information or something from there, and we are holding on to that. And then what happens that openness is not there. So whatever water is being poured, it will all become dirty because there's dirt at the bottom. So this is also another metaphor for a defective listening. Then the third one is it's many times, this is where, we have to look into ourselves, not so much like to kind of say that, oh, okay, this I don't have. We have to really introspect, because all of us at some stage or the other, it will happen for all of us. The third metaphor is that the pot is turned upside down. Then what happens, you're kind of sitting and you're staying there, because either to convince yourself or to convince somebody, you listen, but you are not really open, you're not really receptive. You already closed your mind. So these are the ways, you're listening, you're hearing, but it is not really changing and transforming you. So these metaphors kind of go on to say that the most important thing in listening is our attitude. Of course, it is also important whom you listen from and what you listen from. Like even Vedanta also, we have to choose carefully whom all we are listening from, because every teacher will have their own approach, their own methods. So ideally, we are trying to listen not to too much varieties of teachers. But yet at the same time, it is possible sometimes some teacher, which I mentioned, can focus more on intellectual stimulation. Some can more on the emotional kind of excitement for us. But the real teacher which we should choose to listen from is actually one who is actually helping whatever they say is becoming a sense of reflection for us in our daily life. So that what we are listening to, it should translate into a means of reflection. Of course, we can't, it is, if you are not doing your part, you can't blame the teacher, So in case I get a lot of feedback messages saying, Swamiji, your talks is not effective. So first, ideally, we should look at it. But why I'm saying this is we have to first look at our source of information, knowledge also. That has to translate into it shouldn't just be something you are excited about and then it is not translating to you. So that medium of listening, or that through whom we are listening, should be that source through which we are able to translate it and use it in our life. So there's one more point, and this especially goes to our classes here, which is the important thing. How do we, because now these classes, most of you are like doing online, or listening, right? You're listening through your thing. So there's one of the biggest challenge today is that we are subject to a lot of distractions, So especially, when we sit and hear, we don't, many of us are able to, initially I used to tell many of my students, you listen, put your video on, so you feel more engaged, more participating. Now I've stopped telling much because, many people say, Swamiji, I have this issue, that issue, or so, okay, but you have to be very careful if you want to sit in your own space, that one of the biggest distractions we all know today is our phones, So if you're keeping your phone nearby, some of you may even be using your phone for logging in, then very clearly, like the first message or anything that comes, it will distract you, it will take you away. In fact, there is some research I was hearing that the mere sight of a phone, near you, it is going to take off a percentage of your concentration. So see, all this is like, we may think, okay, no, it is not big deal, so I'll keep my phone next to me. But somehow subtly your mind is always there, some portion of your mind is on that. So that is taken away your effectiveness in being able to focus on the class. So that is, some things I will leave it to you, but I'm just trying to give some of these pointers. One of the reasons why I would initially insist for people to sit on video is sometimes, of course, they may feel like, okay, others are also seeing me and all that. But the idea is that sense of seeing is one thing. It will increase your awareness. But there is also a certain transmission of knowledge or wisdom that happens between the teacher and the student, And for this transmission to be effective, the teacher should also have you in the mind, In other words, like if you are here, not that if he is not able to see you, or then that knowledge from that teacher, we may say it's a subtle thing, I don't believe in this, but you will actually know this, that the teacher, when he knows that you're there, something that is being said, that you come into the mind of the teacher also. So that is also one of the reasons why, it is not just because that we want to see that you are there. It is also important for the teacher to kind of have you in the mind. So these, of course, these are subtle points, and for some people, they already have the discipline, and I'm just kind of telling them. But still, nevertheless, it's a good thing to point out and introspect. So a couple of last points. See, one of the way really we are able to do Shravanam is that for many of us, Shravanam is almost like a yogic practice in reality. So usually, originally Vedanta was given to people who were in the forests or in the mountains. It was not given to general public as it is available now. Before times, because the real teachings of Vedanta, it is not meant for just like a logical analysis, right? It is meant for that illumination to happen within. So that who is that person who what we call has a sadhana chatushtaya, that 4 pillars of sadhana he has. He has already developed himself. And a lot of that Shat Sampatti, that yogic skills he or she has. What are those yogic skills? Like, if one of the ways, I remember I was up in the mountains one time, and one of the sadhu used to tell me this. One of the things that in order to fine-tune your skill of Shravanam, he would say, is you sit by the river and just like a Ganga we have flowing, there. And you hear that sound. And you just keep listening to that. So you see, that is actually a very, very subtle and transformative Shravanam there. It is happening. They say that hum of that Ganga river especially is that sound of Om. Now, of course, there are yogic techniques where you are able to listen to the Om sound and all that. So those are also there. But effectively, there what is happening is you are going into that deep meditative contemplation kind of state. Here, there's a little different in Vedanta, that what we call as that kind of thing is used for mananam. So those of you who have attended my mananam classes, in which I will be speaking for a while and giving some gap, and then, that process of deep contemplation. So there you're using more that kind of skills. Here in this class, actually, we have to engage our mind and intellect. So I generally, some classes, some places I've seen where the speaker is talking and the student closes their eyes and they're listening. So that is not for Vedanta. In Vedanta, especially most Shravanam, you have to engage actively, mentally, even if possible, make notes and all that. Why? Because this knowledge here is not like, immediate thing that will translate for you into an experience, right? Sometimes it can, if you've already done a lot of mananam already. But this is where it is the building blocks for you. So you need to gather these building blocks and then use it in your mananam. So here, whatever you gather, it will actually serve like how when you go to a school, when somebody is teaching you some kind of physics or trigonometry, it may not make sense. But later, when you become an engineer or a, some kind of a scientist, you may see, oh yeah, all that helped. So similarly here, this Vedanta, these so many points, we are learning. We have to engage in actively. We have to make notes. And then, but if you stop there, then that is where it has become accumulation of knowledge, like outer knowledge. What is called as paravidya and aparavidya. Paravidya is like worldly knowledge. That will stop there. So the difference in Vedanta is that you need that yogic thing, but not just to merely be in a state of divine peace or silence or all that. Here, that knowledge becomes a pointer to that ultimate reality. So the knowledge of Vedanta, along with that yogic skills, can result in illumination for us. Yogic skills or any other like skills we do, like doing any upasanas, puja and all that also is included. All that. So this is just an introduction, and I wanted to just give a brief one, because those of you who are listening, who are coming regularly, you can try to be aware of these things, and especially like I didn't talk much about it, but that thing about what in your environment can be a source of distraction. So you know better what is a source of distraction. So ideally, if you can sit in some place where even people are not moving around or not engaging you in a discussion. So this is where first you have to be clear in your resolution. So this first thing, it all starts with the resolution. I want to use this time for 100% attention on my class or listening. And then what, you have to remove those distractions, that phone or close the door and all that. Then you start really coming to this point of transcending that environment. So, like somebody, I was telling somebody, and I was thinking, it's like the three things we can put it down as. First, we resolve, then we remove all the distractions, and then we get to rejoice. So the 3 R's, it just came naturally when I was telling somebody, and I thought I will share this. Okay, so this is about the Shravanam part. So now we will get to our actual class.